G'day everybody, it's Dave from Wing Chun Mind Force. This is the second part of my interview with Grand Master Yip from 1972. So I'm going to start with this statement. Another story recounted about Master Yip standing on the ground in a standing asana pose, where one folds one leg and the entire body is supported by one leg rooted to the ground. Several people pushed him with force at the same time, but were not able to make him budge. It can be seen that he has very strong stamina. When asked about this story, Master Yip responded with a smile. I don't have that kind of strength anymore. Now that's obviously not a story of strength, is it? Interesting that it's called a standing asana. That's a yogic term, and the first and probably major pose in yoga is called Tadasana, which means mountain pose. And there also is a one-legged standing pose where it's called tree pose, Tritkasana. Is that right? Vrishasana. Anyway, it's called tree pose in English, where you stand on one leg and you relax your foot onto the inside of your calf, the other knee points out, and you hold your hands above your head like a tree. So this standing asana is very much what I was told by Sibak Frederick Mo to practice, and I've also been told that Sigong said this to his students, to practice Silnam Dao on one leg. So it sounds like it's something that he used to talk about. And as I said, I find it very interesting that he calls it a standing asana. And I've heard other people talk about a connection with yoga. Don't really know much about it, whether Sigong Chushong Tin practice yoga or just heard about it, or maybe it's part of Chinese culture to talk about such things. Hong Kong's very multicultural. Anyway, saying he has strong stamina is not really how that's being done when all those people are pushing on him. And if you search the internet, you'll find videos of Master Chu Shong Tin also standing on one leg and being pushed by a lot of people. And he takes the force down into the ground. He actually takes it onto a set of scales, and you'll see the weight go right up. And then he does it again where the scales don't load up, but the same sort of feelings felt by the people pushing. And that's where he said that he could throw their force back at them and not take it in at all, which is obviously a higher level. All right, so he then goes on to talk about sticking hands, Chi Sao. He says, Master Yip said it's one of the key things to learn in practicing Wing Chun. Chi Sao is useful for a variety of reasons. Other than strengthening and one's elbow and increasing its stamina in attacks, one can also use it to train oneself in defensive moves. These are inclusive of freestyle boxing moves. Chi Sao is, in essence, key to any self-defense practice. So this is being written by a reporter who's not a Wing Chun guy. And it's always interesting to see how they interpret what they see as strength or some kind of boxing move. I guess you could say that what we do is boxing moves because it is Chinese boxing. Chi Sao is definitely key to learning practical self-defense. He then talks about Master Yip telling him about Fuk Sao, Tan Sao and Bong Sao. He says, compared to your regular martial arts routine, just punches and kicks, you essentially look at three different types of defense acts. According to Master Yip, these three routines, meaning Tan Sao, Fuk Sao and Bong Sao, have merged all of the multiple formations of Wing Chun within. Essentially, all of the Wing Chun movements are combinations of these three types of movements made by the arms: the flipping of the forearm and the lowering of arms. So there, I assume he's talking about how we don't just turn at the wrist, we actually think about turning the whole forearm when we're Chi Sao. So the Bong Sao is not just the wrist turning and leave everything behind. It's all elbow to fingers, and that's like a rolling bar. He then says that in terms of the order of movement, the blockage always occurs before the actual attack. Similarly, the defense and attack usually cannot occur at the same time. And he's talking about people defending an attack with a block. He says, Wing Chun, on the other hand, is entirely different. When one faces a punch, upon receiving that punch, a Wing Chun practitioner is able to attack at the same time. Simultaneous dissolution of an attack, or turning an oncoming attack into a defense, is the most unique concept of Wing Chun. This effectively calls for the slogan in memorizing and practicing the move, whereby an attack is a defense. And we call that simultaneous attack and defense. Lin Sil Dai Da. That's what it is in my bad Cantonese. Simultaneous attack and defense. So we don't block and then strike. We do them both at the same time. And we also strike with as many striking things, fists, palms, forearms, legs, feet, as we can at the same time. One more thing to note is the concept of centerline. What does it entail? Master Yip mentions that all moves target the core center. In other words, turning one's bridge hands into a core so that when an opponent strikes, one is to always ensure that their bridging hands are outside of one's own bridging hands, so that you may hang on to the advantage of being able to both attack and defend. And that's a characteristic of all the forms in Wing Chun, but you particularly notice it when you start to do Chum Kyu, that everything's happening with your wrists on center line. Everything's on the center line, same as most things in Sil Nim Dao, and you're turning with your body. So what seems to be movements, and I've covered this in my videos about Chum Kyu, you're always on the center line. It means the other fella has to be outside the center line. So by wedging into the center line, you're not giving him the option. He try to smash through you in the middle there, but otherwise he's got to come around, which is always a longer path. So next it says, Master Yip stated that all punches thrown are in a rectangular shape, resembling the Chinese character for the sun. We start from the heart and throw a straight-lined punch, acting in the form of the string on a bow. If the opponent throws a punch in the form of a hook, that attack comes in the formation of a curve, much like the shape of the actual handle on a bow. We call these moves riding along the bow. Anyone with a slight understanding of algebra will know that the curved line is longer than the straight line. So that's a basic principle of Wing Chun. We always want to attack by the shortest, quickest, most economical way to strike our opponent. Anything else, any kind of hooking, curving motion, obviously he's got further to travel, and if we're quick and instinctive and bam, we've hit him maybe a fraction of a second before he hits us, but that's enough to shatter his structure. If you do it right, he should be knocked, and even if he hits you, there's not going to be much power in it. That's the theory anyway. Simultaneously, even compared to a straight punch that comes from the waistline, which would be like a karate or taekwondo classical punch, Wing Chun's version is still of a shorter distance. Therefore, all of our punches move strictly from the area near the heart. So they're coming from here. There's also a deeper meaning, which I think I've spoken about, that our empty punches come from the heart, but it sort of means that they're virtual. It means that they come from the mind, but not the ordinary thinking mind. They come from the superconscious mind, the subconscious, the unconscious, but a virtual mind, I guess, that mind map. So the arm, the body, everything's moving in your mind. It might be moving in reality, but the way it's driven is effortless. All right, so he then goes on to say, other than using this example of a string and a bow to illustrate this example in Wing Chun movements, Master Yip also talked of Wing Chun as bamboo and hammer. Now this is very interesting. He says, in theory, a bamboo stick, a hammer, and a bowstring have nothing in common and are not comparable. However, what makes Wing Chun indicative of a bamboo stick is that when the opponent strikes close, if one uses Tan Sao, Fuk Sao, or Bong Sao to receive the attack, that actual strike will be as if hitting on a bamboo stick. One's defense will, at that moment of attack, become pushed back as a result of the force, just like bamboo. When that strike retreats, however, one immediately strikes back at top speed, much like a bamboo stick will bounce back after with great force. Now, I'm going to go into this deeper when I start making videos about Chi Sao. I have touched on this, but my take on Chi Sao is not how can I break through this guy's defense? How can I meet force with force, obviously? He's coming in with a punch, I go bam. I'm not saying you don't strike through if you can, but what Chi Sao teaches us is to absorb first and then turn off his force. And you'll know when you have absorbed his force, you can feel it heading off somewhere else, weakening. And then when you're really taking everything in, there's this force going out, which I believe is the mind force, at some level that you're able to generate it. And it's like a bamboo. You push against it, it takes it, but then as soon as you let it go, bam, it comes back and smacks you in the face. So that's the way our arms want to be in Wing Chun, and probably our whole body, including the legs. So he says, in terms of the example concerning a hammer, this is speaking of the way one exerts force in Wing Chun movements. The force exerted should be exactly like the way one strikes a hammer into the wall. Everyone who has used a hammer to hit a nail knows that if you struck it with brute force, not only does the nail fail to penetrate the wall, it might actually become deformed, bent. One must strike the nail cautiously, using the wrist as an axis and lightly hammering it in. This is what Wing Chun is about. Now, in that video I've just played, you'll see me hitting one nail incorrectly and bending it because I really wasn't focusing, and I haven't actually done any hammering for quite a long time. But then the other two that I did were much better. My mind was really in the hammer and in the end of the nail, and you got to relax, and then you just let the weight of the hammer do the job. So you have to be confident. And I worked as a builder's labourer many years ago, and it was sort of at a funny time. It was just before nail guns became a thing. I mean, maybe somebody was using them, but the builders I worked for are all old school, and we use nails a lot. And I put on a lot of roofs and floors with a hammer and big nails. And at one stage I'd done so much hammering I could actually hammer in a 6-inch nail with one strike. Now, if anyone knows about hammering, they know that's quite a thing. It's a big nail, a 6-inch nail, but I just was so tuned in after hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of nails. It was just like wham, and maybe I landed it a couple of times. It always stuck in my head. It was quite almost miraculous, but it's very much like what we want to achieve. And he then says, many of you might think now that Wing Chun is all about softness, with the focus of using flexibility and softness to overcome strength. I posed this very same question to Master Yip. Master Yip replied, Wing Chun is in some sort a soft school of martial arts. So there you go. It's internal. That's what soft school means, internal. So here's our old master, Master Yip Man, trained for 65 years in China with real original Kung Fu masters. He said, Wing Chun is in some sense a soft school of martial arts. However, if one equates that word as weak or without strength, then they are dead wrong. Chi Sao in Wing Chun is to maintain one's flexibility and softness, all the while keeping in the strength to fight back, much like the flexibility of bamboo. He says, the slogan in Wing Chun is keeping in the incoming strike, sending away the strike back, drop it all and go straight ahead. He then points out that the use of Tan Sao, Fuk Sao, Bong Sao is not about pushing a move to the side or moving one's arms back and forth between the right and the left. Sending away refers simply to sending one's move forward. Going straight ahead refers to, moving ahead. And keeping it in simply means receiving and elbowing into the opponent's punch instead of pushing away that attack with sheer force. So, it's a little bit ambiguous what's being said there, but for me, it's the same principles, moving your mass in, as we learn in Chum Kyu. Your punches are driven by the elbow. At least in the intermediate stages, it becomes a point where it's just a punch. But like I was showing many times before, in which Sifu Bo Bazard really emphasised the driving with the elbow, the whole bar arm, the whole forearm, the whole sao, boom, is driven in. He says, many individuals who are familiar with boxing have told me that these days crime's on the rise. When you're in a flight of stairs, you might run into robbers who grab you from behind. In public washrooms, no one is immune from robbery. Likewise, in restaurants, one look in the wrong direction might leave you beat up and bruised at the hand of gang members. Pretty rough place, Hong Kong in the old days. He says, in tight spaces as these, nothing works better to defend oneself than practicing Wing Chun. And my Sifu Jim Fung said to us once that Wing Chun is a phone box fighting art. And he often talked about being able to fight in an elevator, fight on a set of stairs, a la Born Identity. Yeah, fighting on the phone box when you're trying to change in your Superman suit and somebody comes in, tries to drag you out to use the phone. You never know what can happen. He says, I believe that there's more than an ounce of truth to this declaration. With the various schools in the field of martial arts, each one boasts of a unique edge. Some are more about attacks, some are particularly well suited for defence. Some have simpler moves, some have complicated ones. Some schools require a large amount of space so you can hone your skills, but some are particularly well suited to tight spaces. Wing Chun definitely falls into the latter category. When asked this question, Master Yip's response was, to each his own. It's a good gentleman's response. He didn't say, oh yeah, we're better than those guys down the road. He's better than those ones. He just said, to each his own. Whatever floats your boat. That's what I say too. If you want to go the hard path of being strong and muscular and fit, that's great fun. And you'll probably win most encounters. But Wing Chun has a deeper, more spiritual meaning in it that I really love, a meditative effect, and also Wing Chun's one punch as against 10 to win a fight, and that's what we seek, that sort of power, not just this silly idea that in Wing Chun our punches are so piss weak that we've got to do like 20 punches in 2 seconds. Oh dear. I don't know what's Hong Kong Hollywood called. It's not Bollywood. Anyway, that's that idea that people have given about Wing Chun, but it's really not right. Okay, so other than fists, Wing Chun also has the Luk Dim Boon Gwan, the 6.5 point pole. Some people call it the dragon pole, and the Bat Jam Do, the 8 slashing swords, the butterfly knives. Before moving into practicing Wing Chun with weapons, one must first learn the pole squat, then move on to nailing the pole onto the ground. It then moves on to closing in the poles, as well as darting, closing in and firing the pole. After all these moves, one is then qualified to learn the actual routine. As to the 8 slash sword, its core concept comes from the fist routine. I'm now just showing you hammering with the pole, and when I did the hammer demonstration, I thought this is really the same thing, nailing the pole onto the ground. Here Yip Man has said this to the reporter. We nailed the pole onto the ground. So one way of seeing little ideas, Sil Nim Dao, aside from all the more cosmic stuff I'd talk about, it is a lot of simple ideas, and I think of them as sort of imaginations, little visions, little visual mnemonics that help you get the right feel. And if you just wave the pole up and down, that's not really the right idea. But if you imagine that you are nailing a big wooden nail into the ground, I think that's the right feel. You want that relaxed. You don't stress with the hammer, you don't squeeze it tight, you don't try to use muscle strength. Actually, you let the weight of the stick do the work, and that's the real secret of Luk Dim Boon Gwan. as it is for Wing Chun, you let the mass do the job. You don't use muscle tension. So I hope that makes sense. And then to finish off, he says, another thing worth mentioning is that another martial arts school, the school of Wing Chun, and then he's got Wing Chun, is also very apt at using the 6.5 point pole, but the moves are entirely different. Additionally, the dialect spoken in the Foshan area pronounces Yong and Wing as the same, which has led to many confusions and people believing these schools are one and the same. So that's above my pay grade. I don't speak Chinese. I don't know the ins and outs of all the Kung Fu styles. And much respect to the Yong Chong people. Yong Chun, Wing Chun. I just talk about what I know, which is what we call Wing Chun from Hong Kong, from Master Yip and from Master Chu and other masters who've learnt from them. Finishing off, Master Yip said to pass this on to our dear readers, that's you guys. Yong Chun and Wing Chun both stem from Shaolin. But if you were to believe they are one and the same, then you will be far from the truth. There you go. So he's not really saying one's better than the other, he's just saying they're different. So it must have been a bit of an issue back then. Okay, so that's it. And that was that interview from New Martial Hero magazine from 1972. And I found it online on a website called My Way of Wing Chun, The Learning Curve, which was really very, very interesting website. And thanks to you, the person who posted this. I'm sorry I don't actually have your name on here. I printed this out a few years ago. My Way of Wing Chun, The Learning Curve. Is that back to front? Probably. Anyway, that's it from me, and that's it from dear Master Yip Man via that interview. Next week, we'll be on to something different. For me, I'm stuck here just practicing Wing Chun, making videos, reading books, making more videos, playing Scottish pipe band snare drum, learning Icelandic, playing with my kids, and, believe it or not, my 11-year-old's become obsessed with Cobra Kai, this TV series. And I'm a fan of the original. That was really cool. I love Mr. Miyagi. There's a lot of good stuff in there. And I'm actually going to make a video about wisdom from the original Kung Fu Kid from Mr. Miyagi and with Miyagi Dojo. There's a lot of wisdom in there, actually. Some real good stuff. Anyway, my 11-year-old's obsessed with that, so I've been watching the TV series. It's got all the original characters in. It's really pretty cool. So check it out. I can't remember what it's on. Might be Netflix. Anyway, see you next week, guys.